Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased now to gather such a tremendous panel to let you understand what is important concerning your next RFID strategy. What's next? Let's talk about it with our specialists. So around this table, let me introduce Paul Chartier from Convergence Softwares, coming from London, isn't it?
Hello.
Welcome on board. Gerald Santucci, he's head of the unit knowledge sharing within the European Commission. Welcome to Marseille.
Hello, thank you.
It's a big pleasure. Richard Rees is from Kirkton Associate.
Hello.
Gerard Dessen from GIMA Consulting, but you're also a specialist in many RFID field, and we will make it clearer in a few minutes. And last but not least, Trevor Pierce, welcome on board too.
Thank you.
Okay, so now the first question is quite simple. Where did the idea for the mandate on RFID standards come from? Mr.
If you allow me, I
Santucci.
will try to start. Thanks to Precise that the question is simple, the answer may not be of the same kind. Everything started, as far as the mandate is concerned, in December 2008. It was when we signed the contract with the European standardization organizations to launch a mandate on RFID standards. And as you know, it took until April this year to have the final result in the form of 2 European norms, plus a number of reports and specifications. So it was quite a number of years. But actually, the mandate itself was not something alone. It came as a consolidation, if I may call it like that, of a co-regulation exercise that took place between 2000 and 2009, and which resulted in a recommendation of the Commission to the Member States. And that recommendation included a number of elements, in particular what we call PIA, Privacy Impact Assessment, I will come back to it, notification with a European sign, a common European sign, security, and also a number of awareness campaigns in order to inform and improve the knowledge and visibility of RFID among the public. So there were a number of things to be done. But a recommendation is not a law. It's not a mandatory thing. Now, we had to bear in mind that the recommendation on RFID was quite linked to a legislative framework in Europe.
In each country, I guess.
That was the Data Protection Directive of 1995 and the E-Privacy Directive of 2002. So, in this context, talking with the stakeholders how to make a recommendation, which took a lot of time, and I said it was finished in 2009, on the month of May, it was a co-regulation process because, one, it was built upon the general legislative framework, and two, it was managed by the Commission. This said, at the end of the day, it was still a recommendation, that is, a series of codes of conduct, best practices, by which the Commission invited the Member States, industry, and other stakeholders to do a number of things. But in order to reinforce and to stimulate the process of implementing the recommendation, we had the idea to request support from the European standardization organizations with the mandate. And today, we have, as I said, a number of documents, very detailed, plus 2 European norms, the first ever in the world on PIA and the European Common Sign, which complete, if I may say, the recommendation in order to reinforce the prospects for the provisions of the recommendation to take place in the real world. The last thing I would like to say, because some people who listen to us may not know what is a PIA, a Privacy Impact assessment. This is not an object, and this is why it's not easy to define it. It is a process. It is a process that allows to assess the impacts on privacy of a product, a service, a program, a policy, whatever. And that's also very, very important, in consultation with stakeholders to take the remedial actions as needed in order to avoid or minimize the potential risks.
Okay, I think it's quite clear, and there's a good news. We start by good news because for the first time in the world, we starting to build a true standard in a place, Europe, where people used to say it's difficult, so many countries. If this is a good news, let's take profit from this first point. Concerning this first point, okay.
One thing to be noticed, by the way, is that this initiative was taken at European level. The aim is to convince everyone in the world, but the initiative was at European level, where the concern about privacy is very important.
It's important
to notice.
On a technological point of view. It's not so common when standards are coming, and it's true that in Europe we are very high standards concerning privacy. So in both cases, I think if we succeed, it's going to be a great thing. Okay, something to add concerning this first topic? Trevor, okay, everything is all okay. Yeah. Okay, so now let's move to the second questions. What is the scope of the mandate for a technology perspective? Maybe, Paul, I think you could start from that point.
The situation has been confusing, so let's easily clarify it. Because of different standards bodies, the technologists think that RFID is one thing, and for example, smart card is something else, and NFC is something else. The Commission made it very, very clear in the mandate that if radio frequency technology is used, it is within the scope of the mandate. And therefore, all the standards, all the work we did, looked at all the technologies that were already standardized and addressed them in detail. And I think there'll be questions later to discuss, for example, specific threats and so on. But effectively, it is everything, and it also covers, and again there was another issue, it also includes contactless payment as well. So it's important that people understand that you are exchanging your privacy every time.
Many times a day, hours, and if the world is getting more and more intelligent, it will be every second. So I think it's of utmost importance. Okay, thank you very much. On that specific topics, something to add, Trevor?
Let me just maybe say that I was motivated to get involved in the process of writing the response from the ESOs of the European Standards Organizations, which resulted from the invitation from the mandate, because as a European citizen I could identify with the recommendation. So clearly was it written, and so clearly was it encompassing a protection of our values, that it motivated me to get involved in it. So I'm delighted to see that the process has come as far as it has.
I think it's effectively extremely exciting. Oh, yes, Gerald?
Maybe just to complete, I would like to say that in the recommendation itself, only one example was used, the one of retail. And unfortunately, some people interpreted it as meaning that the provisions on retail were exclusively designed for retail. That was a mistake on our side. In the text, we cannot cover all the applications of RFID, but perhaps taking only one was not the right thing to do. Simply at the moment when the recommendation was worked out, there was a real concern in the population in Europe with the application of RFID in the retail sector. And we had to provide some response to that worry. But it was clear for us that what was said about retail had a lot of value for it, but also was one example, a template, if you want, that was supposed to be extended to a number of other applications.
That's quite clear. Thank you. So now let's move up to public awareness of RFID system. How will the public be notified of the presence of RFID readers and tagged items? That's, I think, quite important. I don't know who wants to answer. Maybe you, Richard?
Yes, I'm Richard Rees. I was the project editor for this European standard. People will be notified by a signage system very much like, and indeed based on, the closed-circuit TV system signs that you see more or less everywhere you walk. Basically, the idea is that people should know that there may be an RFID system operating in the area that they're in, and that there should be a means that they can find out more about why the system is operating and who they can speak to get more information. The two situations that have been identified, one is where you walk into an area where there are readers in the premises, usually fixed readers, but of course more and more mobile readers attached to smartphones and such like. In that case, the sign should be at the entrance to every entrance in the area where these readers may be operating. It's not a sign that they are operating, and the sign, positioning the sign, does not indicate that this is where the reads will start and finish. It's just making you aware. Just be careful about what's happening. The next challenge, of course, is that you have tags on items. It may be clothing, it may be food, it could be anything. These tags, of course, are going to be carried out of the shops and be in bags. And when you're carrying them along, somebody with an RFID reader deliberately or even accidentally might read the information from that tag and might be able to associate something about your purchases with you. So you need to be aware of that, and that is why there's a need for the common emblem, which indicates that there is something in the way of an RFID system present, is being asked to be placed on each item as well as on the signs when you go into an area where readers are operating.
All right, so it will be extremely, just a
You
reaction.
can show
Gerard.
the camera, this is the emblem he's talking about. And this
Okay.
is shown on the badge itself, so that gives you an example of what we have done.
I don't know if we can zoom in the badge to show exactly what the sign, and people seeing this show could get used to it, because in the future it could be everywhere, of course. Another question, personal questions. How will you do with active chips which cover a field, can be a very long field? So will it be the same? Because if an active field is inside a shop and you walk outside and the fields, so that must not be extremely easy, is it? Or Richard?
When you're dealing with active tags, the tags themselves are often readers themselves, so there's a peer-to-peer relationship.
All right.
Generally speaking, this type of equipment is used in industrial uses.
Yeah.
But yes, there is an issue. As smartphones become cleverer and have more battery, effectively more battery power, then we need to understand the implications of that. It may be that when you start an application up which is energizing your smartphone reader, should these come along, then the application itself should have the emblem coming up to warn you that you're energizing a system.
It's true that now we're not reading side. We first receive information on our laptop, desktop, tablets, and all that kind of intelligent material. Okay, thank you. So we've talked about threats. Now, yes, you want to add something?
May
Yes,
I
Trevor,
add something?
please go ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
also, I would like to make a link to the work that extends from that. Marks and Spencer's approached me as one of the contributors and leaders of RFID in Europe to develop a website which would help support this whole process. It's called RFID in You. And it's a project that puts into plain terms what RFID means for public and citizens. It was a means for them to communicate with their customers, but also an opportunity for them to communicate with their staff, so that a consistent message would be extended out about how RFID is used by individuals often unknown, and bringing them many advantages, but also introducing the topics that we talked about now, the emblem, and also the PIA, to ensure that people understand also that there are these protections that have been put in place to safeguard their privacy and to look after issues related to security too.
And just to add on the European sign, to be fully transparent, I would like to refer to the work that was managed in 2011 by Trevor in association with us and other people, and that everyone can find on the website, which is the RFID guidelines for the implementation of the European Common Sign. In full transparency, people can see that the debate was hot, was true, was long, but took place and finished well.
So a happy ending is not so common within economic and political stakes. So it's good, very good news. It's a
thank you for that. I think also what was great about it was we had so much industry participation. So at the end of it, somebody who hadn't been participating in the process, the CIO of a major retailer, said it was one of the best pieces of work he'd ever seen coming from the Commission. So. And indeed, we had every side of the debate and the discussion also included in it, which was a great success, and I hope helped contribute to phase 2, which I wasn't able to participate in.
So on the legal issue and the political issue, news are quite good. Now let's talk about threats and vulnerabilities, because RFIDs do have, or do they still have? You will answer to that question in the coming seconds. But what are the challenges when implementing RFID systems?
So let's talk about the threats. When you handle a RFID system, you handle information. So it can be commercial, it can be also linked with privacy or with people. So the threat is very simple. You don't want this to be hacked, you don't want this to be treated wrongly, and you don't even want to show the information. So that's the threat. And in an RFID system, you have basically 3 components. I'll make it simple. You have the information system, which we don't treat. We didn't treat it at this level. And you have the RFID devices, and you have the communication between the devices. And the vulnerability comes from the fact that you can enter into the system. Either you can monitor or use a fake reader or a tag to pass wrong information or capture information.
So you can hack.
Or you can hack. Both in the communication system, what we call the air interface, or you can just act on the devices themselves. So this
it's a serious threat.
And this is a serious threat because you can possess unlawfully the information, or you can even write wrong information to replace the information that is already existing in the system.
Can you imagine terrorism within the health industry, that kind of thing?
That is a key issue. And at the time we entered into this work, by the way, one of the deliverables that was made under the mandate was to analyze all these cases. So I don't want to enter into the details, but there is a document that you can get from any national standardization organization that will list all these threats. And in terms of vulnerability, we, at that time, let's say go back to 2010-11, there was no encryption even envisaged. There was direct information written on the device, and there was no system that could hide the information. So it means that the system are definitely vulnerable.
Totally open.
Totally open to anybody.
Yeah, all right.
Last comment I would like to make, which is very important, because nobody talks about that in general.
Yeah.
We know that if you want to operate an RFID system, you have to follow the rules, because you are using radio frequency, and every state has initiated a certain number of rules that you have to follow.
To integrate.
And this implies that the range of communication, depending on each technology that is used, is limited. However, and so people say that, for instance, if you have a tag that can be read at 10 centimeters, and if you are 1 meter away, you're safe. But this is wrong. And why is it wrong? Because the hacker, if he wants to capture the information, doesn't give a damn about the regulation. He will just power up the system and then watch from far away. So that is a very heavy risk. So you understand? So this is very important. So we have to put ourselves in the situation where you want to get the information. You will power up your system, put a fake tag, a fake reader, and you can enter into the system. Of course, in the meantime, the industry has reacted, and now we are thinking in terms of encryption and other means of protecting the information. But that didn't exist in the days we started this job. So to summarize my answer, if somebody wants to know more, just go to the technical report that has been published by the European Standards Organization that will list all the actual
the threats, but
the threats
also
and the
practical responses.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. On that point, something to add, or I think it's quite clear, but maybe, yeah.
A very small point to add. With computing systems, the computer companies welcome. I mean, for example, last week Google announced that they would pay up to $15,000 for any bugs that are found in their system because they want to fix it to avoid the hackers. There are typically 8,000 vulnerabilities identified every year in computer systems managed by the US CERT and CERT EU and those kind of things. You try to find the technical identification of vulnerabilities for RFID. It is a hidden secret, and this is one of the problems that we've had to address.
And I think it's extremely important. Trevor, yes, please, your reaction.
I think as well we have to not overemphasize the challenge RFID represents. It's not an RFID problem necessarily. There are maybe some vulnerabilities, but the challenge that we are talking about here is a much wider topic about information systems as well. We're only talking about a component element, and what I think is also important to recognize is it's not just the technology, but how it's used. It's what information is encoded in the tag, what information could, all these things escalate the risks involved.
Okay, thank you. So we've talked sooner about PIA. You gave us, Gerald, an accurate definition. But what is now the scope of the PIA? Wants to answer? Yeah, Paul.
Well, the scope, as I've already mentioned, covers all the technologies. But the problem is you still have to kind of filter through all of those technologies. So what the standard does in terms of the PIA, and again we had problems getting even the technology companies understanding this, is that the scope starts from the technology company's point of view of describing what they call a privacy capability statement. There is a registration center that is being set up, and that is run by CNRFID, and they will collect information basically about any and every RFID product on the market and provide that free of charge to the world. Now that then basically deals with the point that Gerard just mentioned, which is the threats and the vulnerabilities, because some technologies and some products have means called countermeasures that can be implemented and some not. But again, working through the standards, one of the things we also found, which was extremely interesting, is that although we identified 49 countermeasures in the PIA standard, only one of them is actually hardwired into the technology. All the others are down to user choice. So what we have, if you like, is the user has to decide in many cases what data they encode, because if you encode someone's name or some detailed identifier, I mean, the names around the table are fairly uncommon, but in English, if you had a name John Smith, it's extremely common in terms of what it is. But there you might have an ID, a membership number, which is unique to you. So the different data has different asset values in terms. The threats have different values in terms of what they do. We have at the moment in the process no way of dealing with vulnerabilities selectively, so they all have the same value because of this lack of information about the thing. And then you apply the countermeasures to reduce the risk in terms, and that the whole PIA process does that. But it does it selectively by the data you're putting in for your application, for the technology, and the products you're using. So it is very, very specific.
I think it's quite clear. Thank you very much. So, Gérald Santouchi, you already talked about the European overview concerning privacy, but more accurately, how will PIAs be managed across the EU on a practical point of view? Now and also after the DPP regulation, maybe you could talk about this regulation coming out.
You have got the point. The management of the PIA is still a relatively open field, but I will try to make it a bit clearer. First, it's important to know that the concept of PIA is not so old. It's 20 years ago, the mid-90s. And it quickly was used in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Hong Kong, US, but not in Europe. Not in Europe.
How was that?
The first country in Europe that made use of PIA as a concept, it was the UK at the turn of this century. And the UK Information Commissioner's Office issued a guidebook, whatever it was called, on PIA in 2007, if I remember well. So it's not so old. In fact, the PIA for RFID is the first ever process documented on PIA. So it sets an example. At the time when it was adopted, that is at the beginning of 2011, there was not yet a draft proposal for a regulation on data protection. The good news is that when the regulation becomes a law, a European law, it will be able, for its concept of DPIA, that is Data Protection Impact Assessment, to draw benefit from the work that has been done for the RFID PIA. And in fact, the reason why DPIA was introduced in the draft regulation is precisely the fact that the people in DG Justice who worked with us on the development of the RFID PIA saw that there was a need to do it in a more extended way. Now you could say, yes, but on one hand we have a PIA, a Privacy Impact Assessment, and on the other hand we have a DPIA, a Data Protection Impact Assessment. It is the same. Who knows? You have the PIA in the world. In some parties of the world you have privacy risk management. Now in Europe we are going to have DPIA. It's not exactly the same. If we are pointilliste, it's not the same. Why? Because in a way, privacy is broader than data protection. Data protection is only about the processing of personal data. But on the other hand, data protection is broader than privacy, because it is the processing of personal data, whether or not it interferes with the privacy of people. And therefore we are here not in a cloud, because this is something that has a different interpretation today. But there is still an open field. What I can say is that historically there is a link between the RFID PIA and the concept of DPIA in the draft regulation. My belief is that when the draft regulation becomes a law, the example of the PIA for RFID will become de facto the example to follow in terms of process to understand why and when there is a need to conduct a PIA, what are the threats if they exist, what is the likelihood of these threats, and what is the amplitude of these threats, because this is what we have to do first of all when we conduct a process for PIA.
It's quite clear. In an environment where the definition of privacy can be extremely different from a country to another, and maybe that's one of the key points.
You will find some people who will talk of the privacy of a person, of thought and and feelings, of behavior and action, of data and image, of communications that we have, of location and space. But you will find also experts who will tell you the same with different words. So in Europe, data protection has a legal definition, but privacy has not. And in fact, it has not anyone in the world. It's something that is academic, where you will find a lot of excellent work on what it is, what is the scope of it, but it's not legal. So the difference between privacy and data protection from a legal point of view is full of nuance, and it's not easy to see where, when starts one and when it ends.
Thank you very much. I think it's quite clear. So our PIA, just for retail application, what is the scope exactly? Maybe Paul, you could make it clearer.
I'll just add a little bit to what Gerald has just said. Data protection is basically, imagine a fortress. So effectively, the responsibility lies with the security officer of a company to stop something leaking out and people getting in. But with the wireless technologies, including RFID, it is already leaking out and totally open in terms of what it is. So so now, coming to the question that you just raised about, is it only for retail applications? If you just think about that, you walk out of a retail store with a retail product with an RFID tag on, it will tell you what product you've got, and because the code is unique, it will make you traceable for a period of time. But now think of all of the other things you carry, including this badge around our neck today, and the fact that people come and go home from work every day with lanyards around their neck that can easily be read, that is RFID enabled. People go to libraries, you go to airports, and you walk out with a baggage tag.
It can be a terrible track and trace.
Exactly, and it leaves all of those things open. And Jean mentioned about all the possibilities, if you like, of capturing the data. A fallacy that people work on is that you capture data on a one-on-one basis. From a technology point of view, you can set systems up basically just to capture data and to be able to do that. So, and if you use pure wireless technology and not the ordinary readers that the public will use, then you can actually capture a lot of data. But equally, you know, now with NFC phones, there's something like 600 million NFC phones around, and many of them can actually read NFC cards.
So that's
so it's the whole scope of anything to do with RF technology.
It's quite clear. We're close to the end of this debate. I have last one question, and maybe I will ask you to conclude by 20 seconds speech. But last question, maybe for you, Richard. Is there an international equivalence of the PIA process from the EU and the requirement for notification? What else in the rest of the world? What's happening?
Strictly speaking, no. The European norms that have been produced in the context of Europe and the requirements that Europe and the EU regulations require. But as you heard from Gerald, when the work on the PIA was being done, it was drawing on the experience of the UK and America, Canada, New Zealand, and the steps that are required to deal with privacy protection when you're dealing with systems which collect data, store data, allow data to be accessed, are pretty much understood and agreed across the world. What you have to remember, of course, is that standards are not the law. They can be referred to by a law, but they are not the law, and therefore the standards have to respect the law in each country in which they're being operated. I think the other thing to remember was a point that Paul was starting to touch on, that this work has been done in relation to RFID, and he pointed out the problems of defining what RFID means right now. It'll mean something different in 5 years' time, and when we see the Internet of Things coming, there are going to be all sorts of other technologies like low-energy Bluetooth, like 6LoWPAN, all doing the same basic functional activities, and they will be regarded as systems which collect store and allow data to be accessed. And therefore, when you're putting in this sort of system, the same issues of notification and impact assessment will need to be carried out.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's quite clear. So, gentlemen, we are very close to the conclusion. We still have 4 minutes before conclusion, so you are 5. So if we share 4 minutes, it's about 40 seconds each. Why not? Why? Just to provide us with a conclusion, or maybe a specific point you wanted to focus and you didn't have the opportunity so far to take it. So I think, Paul, you want to conclude.
No, what I was going to suggest is perhaps, as Trevor spoke about Internet of Things this morning, he can sort of do the extrapolation from RFID to Internet of Things and talk about some of the Internet of Things items.
So, Trevor, as a
Look,
conclusion,
I think what I
let's
wanted to say talks to that anyway. It mentions that, in fact, people often look at an application in isolation and they think about what they try and extrapolate from it without understanding how other people are going to do that. I have a classic example of that with my father-in-law, who thought it was great that on Google Earth he could see what his neighbors were doing. But then when I showed him a picture of him taken from the road, he was less impressed, and he suddenly saw that he could be the object of this as well as a person to profit from it. So I think all this discipline that we bring in is certainly valuable. It's valuable because it not only improves on privacy, but it improves on security. European competitiveness and our ability to defend what we have is also based on security. So it's not a question that this has just got one purpose in terms of privacy. It has purposes much broader than that, indeed. So I think it's excellent. I think it should help make people reflect broadly on what they're trying to do, on how it might be exploited. I'm sure as technology moves very quickly, and you mentioned Internet of Things, we have many, many things that will impact upon our lives, not just RFID and NFC, and you talk about other wireless. It doesn't have to be just wireless. There are many, many things that will impact our lives. So I would hope this is the basis of further good guidance from the European Commission on the Internet of Things, and further additional work to keep up to speed with the pace of technology.
Thank you so much. Maybe one last word as a conclusion.
Yeah, let me discuss about one problem that I had since I joined this team when we worked together to develop all these standards and norms and so on and so forth. You know, right? We started to work together sometime back 2007, and along all these years, I said to myself, but is there any danger that emphasizing the risks, vulnerabilities, and the threats of the industry, of the technology, would it do some harm to the industry? Do we do the right thing? Specifying all these things which seem at the first look negative. But what I would like to say is we have associated, and the European Commission has associated to the work, consumer associations. And rather to hide the truth, I think it was good to tackle the right problem so that the industry could react in a positive way and to protect everyone. And in the end, I think we did a great job. So that's important to say.
That's important to be focused. Richard, maybe one last word in about 22 seconds, maybe, as a conclusion or something to add or to focus on.
Yeah, but basically don't be scared of this work. As I said, it's very similar to CCTV, and you see these signs everywhere. The PIA process, people get very excited about it, and then you find that they have a department of 60 lawyers doing something they call risk assessment. Well, it's a very, very similar process. When I have many, many years happy experience of acting as a packaging designer, and when we produced the emblem, it was designed in a way that allows almost any regular printing technique to produce this emblem, and at a very small level if you have a very small real estate. So don't be scared of it, just do it. I can tell you there were plenty of companies who implemented the standard even before it was published.
Thank you very much. Last chance for you. Okay, so...
Maybe one of two things to conclude. First, I would like to come back to the basics. Why do we have a recommendation? Why do we have a mandate? Or the conclusions of a mandate. Certainly not only to maintain busy a lot of brilliant people. It's first of all to build trust. to build trust, in order to encourage, to stimulate the take-up of RFID technology, in order to realize the full potential of the benefits of RFID, and therefore to make a contribution to increase growth, competitiveness, and employment. I want to stress all that. It's not a game between people who like RFID. It is to build trust and therefore to reanimate this economy in Europe that suffers so much today. The second thing I would like to do, Gérard said that he started to work on that in 2007. Il est pas loin. The whole process started sometime in 2005, so almost 10 years ago, through the consultation phase, through the development of the recommendation, until the moment when we had the adoption of the two ENs this year, almost 10 years. Now, it is a responsibility of industry to pick up the results and to use them in the way I said, building trust to foster growth. The member states have a role to play to encourage and facilitate the implementation of both the recommendation and the standards. The Commission today has no intention to legislate on one technology, even on Internet of Things, which covers a lot of technologies. Now, we are looking at the economy, we are looking at the society, we are concerned if the public would say that they are worried by the way the technology is introduced in what we call today the quantified self and many sectors of the economy that are part of the broader Internet of Things. And we look at that. There is no intention to legislate. It's not, in this case, a good thing. But we need to look at the problems as they are felt by the people. I just want to say that after 10 years of hard work, all the conditions exist to make that the implementation of RFID can be done safely and in a way that will promote growth and benefits for all.
I think it's probably the most important. Thank you for this conclusion of all the conclusion. Gérald Santucci, thank you, gentlemen, and stay tuned because till tonight we have lots of another appointment. Thank you very much and stay tuned within RFID Congress TV. Thank you.